Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to continue our journey towards Plant 2021. I feel like it's only a few days away before we break into some soil, but we still have a few more projects to get done before that happens. Before we get too far along, everyone make sure you smash that like button down below. We're going for 1,000 likes on every video this spring. I appreciate you guys doing that. It helps me out a ton. For it being so close to what I call planting season, it was actually kind of chilly this morning. The lows were just above 20 degrees. Not only is that not plant growing weather, that's actually plant killing weather. With the exception of today and yesterday, everything looks like a green light for this upcoming week. I had an excellent question in the comments of the previous video asking about soil temperature and how that affects our planting decisions. Well, soil temperature is a very good metric for deciding when it's an appropriate time to begin planting. It's not the end-all be-all because there are many different factors that go into deciding what perfect conditions are. Before you even begin to worry about how warm the soil is, you must first consider how dry the soil is. This field of corn stalks right here behind the farm, which will be going into soybeans, is actually showing the first signs of drying out. The preliminary indication of soil dryness begins as graying out on the topsoil. Basically, graying out is the terminology for when that top layer of ground starts to lose its moisture and starts to appear dry. Probably a little challenging to visualize this through the camera lens. This right here has a gray appearance on top, this topsoil, and you get over here, it's a little darker because it's still retaining moisture. The fact that certain areas of the field are showing this grayness means that we are getting closer to dry soil conditions. As I said though, this is a preliminary metric. Just because it's dry on the top inch of the soil does not mean the rest of the ground is ready to farm. Realistically, the top of the soil is going to dry the fastest, especially when there's wind in the area. Wind wicks away that moisture from the soil and takes it elsewhere. If you were to take a field cultivator out here and try and work these stalks, you'd realize that there's probably still mud underneath. The added level of residue from all the corn stalks and corn material out here in the field usually makes this type of ground hold moisture longer than, say, soybean stubble from a previous soybean crop. That's why corn usually gets planted before soybeans. The ground is just drier quicker. Let's hop back to the other topic though, soil temperature. It is commonly stated that the minimum soil temperature for plant germination is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I can assure you today, after 2 days with a low of 20 degrees, this soil is not over 50. But if the soil was dry enough, you would consider planting those seeds if the long-term forecast was looking very favorable for warm, dry weather. Which for us right now, we're looking at a week of 70 to 75 degree highs and no rain. When you're making decisions as important as planting, you have to be cognizant of current conditions and also mindful of what's going to be happening over the next few weeks to a month. Even though current conditions are pivotal to making great decisions, you have to be mindful of what lies ahead in the next few days. You always have to be 2 steps ahead of what's going on. And with weather forecasts in Mother Nature, it can be very challenging to make the accurate decision, so you just have to play the hand you're dealt to the best of your ability. In the case of our operation, it may be cold today, the ground's probably still a little chilly, but over the next few days, it's going to be warm and it's going to be dry, so we'll probably be planting. I've got a few backhoe projects that I didn't get done before it thawed out this winter, so we should probably get that done. Then we'll worry about planting. About a month and a half to 2 months ago, I started on a project to clear a bunch of these trees along the fence row on the interstate. I got about 98% done after maybe 3 days of hard work along it, and I quit for the day thinking I'd be able to come back the next day and finish it. Well, lo and behold, the next day it snowed 10 inches, and by the time the snow melted, the ground was completely thawed out and saturated. We're gonna quickly refine the few pieces where I left a mess, and then we're gonna call it quits because I don't want to pack this field down too much. This backhoe handles mud very well. Anywhere you're creating mud in a field though is very, very bad for the crop come growing season. Those roots don't like to push through that level of compaction. Shame on me for only leaving about 10 minutes worth of work. It's a life lesson for you. If you can finish something, as opposed to leaving it and coming back later, you might as well finish it. I wouldn't be out here making a mess right now if I just spent an extra 30 minutes doing this as opposed to quitting for the day. Although I may have had other commitments, so maybe that's why I left. On the bright side, I get to spend my morning next to this beautiful pond. It's only a little sticky right here. Ooh. By a little, I mean a lot. All these little yellow flags down the fence line are marking a natural gas line. What that means is don't dig too deep here. There's one set of twigs right down there that I think can be picked up by hand. If I drive this backhoe through there, I want to do an unnecessary amount of damage. Using that spot as evidence, I don't think I want to repeat that going down that fence line. I'll let the field cultivator driver pick it up when he goes through. That or just hook onto it with the field cultivator and drag it all the way to the end. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid. Obviously it's not that frozen even though it's 20 degrees. You hate to see it. I think someone should have told that truck that it's a little muddy right there. I wonder if that was official Department of Transportation or Ameren natural gas pipeline business, or if that was just some hooligan trying to have a little fun. They probably had to get pulled out. Kids these days, they don't make them like they used to. I wouldn't have gotten stuck. You're not gonna find a better example of graying off than this farm right here. You can see very clear lines out in the field where it's drier in certain areas, especially where there's higher, lighter soils. And then down on the bottom where the darker soils are, it's a lot darker. That diversity shows you what's drying the fastest and what's retaining moisture. And if you pay close attention at this time of the drying process, you can actually visualize where tiles run. For instance, you can see right in here, there's a tile draining that section of the field. And all these areas out in the middle, there's quite a bit of tile doing the same thing. I thought the overpass would give you a good view, but looks like the roadside view of this graying off is even better. Now we're on to fix a tile hole. A little bit of dust rolling off the tires out here. We can tell the tile's plugged based on the water bubbling up over there. We're estimating that there's probably about 80 foot here crushed. We're gonna dig from the far point to where my dad's pointing now, and then we're gonna replace the tile, that easy. So the old clay tile through here was basically junk, almost completely disintegrated, which I believe has something to do with these terraces being built and redug out a few years ago. Those bulldozers are not very forgiving, especially when a tile's laid as shallow as this one was. Our original estimation was 80 foot. We've got 150 foot of 5-inch tile here to try and slide over the outside, but I would say we're actually going to use about 100 to 110. We've dug probably 20 to 30 more foot than we had originally planned on. But we're going to keep digging. Hopefully we'll get this fixed. We finally hit the part of the tile that's still flowing, if you can't tell by the amount of water coming out. I tried to dam it off with the backhoe, but our trench may be full here in a little bit. Oh, there's a little crawdad. You guys hungry? Usually to avoid damage of this magnitude, tile is laid at least 3 foot in the ground, so it has 3 foot of soil over the top of it to help prevent it from anything, you know, rippers, field cultivators, heavy weight over the top from crushing it. What happened here though is that this tile existed before these terraces did. So when the terrace was put in, the tile was basically moved into a position where it was susceptible to damage because a lot of the topsoil had been moved off of it to create this berm. The old tile is in pretty rough shape, so this may just be a temporary fix. If it'll last us a few years, that's better than nothing. This wet hole's been here a while, if you can't tell by the amount of algae sitting on top of it. Because it was so cold outside, I didn't really want to hold up the process at all, so I didn't explain a lot of what was going on. I'll give you a quick rundown at what we just did. From the beginning of the trench all the way here to the end, the old clay tile, which was 5 inches in diameter, was completely ruined. As we do with all these old, ancient, broken clay tiles, we dig out the bad pieces and replace it with a plastic section. In this case, the plastic section was over 100 foot long. We did our best to keep it on grade so it didn't fill full of silt. It's really not that big of a deal. It's draining a very minor area, I think, under the interstate there. We completed the job to a satisfactory standard, covered the whole thing with dirt. I didn't drive over all that dirt and pack it down. I'm hoping to let Mother Nature kind of settle the dirt a little bit. When it's that shallow, driving over with something very aggressive like the backhoe may collapse that plastic tile too. We'll give it some time. We'll hit it with the field cultivator here in a week or two. Should be good to go. We're taking advantage of this semi-dry weather to go ahead and core these last 3 bins of corn that we've been sitting on here for the last few months. It's been too wet at this bin site to do anything. Planting season is so close I can almost taste it. That or that's my lunch, I'm not sure. Speaking of planting, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released a very monumentous report yesterday. This report was the planting intentions in the United States for 2021 crop year. This is just a survey-based determination of how many acres U.S. farmers are going to plant into different crops this growing season. Corn was expected to come in at 93 million acres, and soybean was expected to come in roughly at 90 million acres. That's a pretty large chunk of ground in the United States dedicated to growing those 2 row crops. The general consensus coming into this report was that there was going to be an all-time high for planted acres. Basically, the high prices we've had over the last 6 months were going to encourage people to plant these grains wherever they could find. If they could grow it in the middle of the road, you'd bet they'd be out there harvesting it in 6 or 7 months. That's what everyone was thinking that this report was going to show, and that's why they had that guess for those acres. In reality, when this report came out, they showed only 91 million acres of corn, roughly, and 87 million acres of soybeans. That is 2 million acres short apiece. Needless to say, the market was very surprised by the numbers that came out, and both corn and soybeans were locked limit up in price. That is essentially the largest price variation allowed in one trading day. For corn, that was 25 cents up, and for soybeans, that was 70 cents up. Those are massive moves. What this does is play with the supply and demand a little bit. Hopefully every cent they tick that price higher, they're encouraging more farmers to plant grain. That way they can get that supply up. 2 million acres out of 90 million acres roughly doesn't seem like that big of a loss. When you factor in 2 million acres multiplied by our trend line yield, our expected yield for this season, which on corn I believe is 145 to 150, don't quote me on that, that is 900 million bushels of corn. That is a lot. On the soybean side, 2 million times 45 is the trend line yield. Don't quote me on that either. That is 90 million bushels of soybeans. For reference, our ending supplies this year were 120 million bushels of soybeans. That is a very low amount of soybeans to end the year with. And by dropping those 2 million acres, they cut 75% of what that expected carryout would be out of the picture. That's a pretty bullish case for grains. I imagine come planting time, you'll see a lot more acres being put in, but anything's possible. So where did all of those acres disappear to? I couldn't tell you. Maybe some farmers are choosing a different crop that has a better price point than corn and soybeans in their area, or they may just be choosing to not plant corn and soybeans in those marginal areas like they have in years past. That is unlikely. I would imagine that they found something else, maybe grain sorghum, which has had a very strong demand as of late to plant there, or something more competitive like wheat. I can't tell you what all these other farmers are doing, but we're still planting 100% of our acres into corn and soybeans. Okay, that is more than enough talking and farming for one day. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate your support. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace.